And next from the 1:15 to 1:35 hour, we are really lucky to have Dr. Dawn Jones, one of the co-founders and the head of the Virtual First Medical Practice Collaborative, as a part of the DIME. And he will be interviewing both Natalie, who is going to stay on camera, who, again, for everyone who's just joined, is the head of the Digital Health Innovation Group within Organon, the newly spun off multi-billion-dollar women's health company from Merck. And we have Priscilla Beal, who is the head of global partnerships at Bayer Pharmaceuticals, both of whom are on the board for the Women's Health Tech Initiative, and Priscilla, who chairs that board. So very happy to welcome everyone, and looking forward to hearing this. Thank you all for joining us.
Well, thank you, Stan, and I'm welcoming my guests. And Stan likes to refer to me as Dr. Jones, but just for everybody's benefit, my doctorate's a doctorate in jurisprudence. And while I've built medical groups totaling over 40,000 physicians, I don't hold one of those prized MD degrees. So just to be clear to everyone, welcome both Priscilla and Natalie to the table. And I'm going to start with a discussion a little bit about virtual first healthcare delivery. And that's the role of impact. And we're starting to see a number of health plans roll out virtual first health plans, where effectively the entire health plan is seen through a digital front door and as much digital interaction as possible, with the elimination as much bricks and mortar as possible. And I'm wondering, in the context, and Natalie, we'll go with you first, how is digital first, in your thinking, going to impact your strategy of both reaching women and serving women when the traditional bricks and mortar may be playing a less role?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's something that we have observed and are looking closely at. For me, I like to make things as simple as possible. So our strategy, one thing that won't change is keeping the woman at the center and that unmet need at the center. And so when we do that, and we start working towards solutions, right, we're going to build our business around that. And when it comes to reach, right, or how we can best ensure that our solutions reach the patient, our goal is to be open and agnostic around any mechanism that enables that. I know that is very general at this time, but we're also a month old. So, so we are still in the process of listening and learning.
Well, if you were a venture-backed company, the VCs would tell you you've got another 4 weeks.
Yeah, no, hey, we're close. We're getting there. And I'm also learning. So I'd love to hear, what Priscilla has to say and what you have to say.
Priscilla, what are your thoughts about the virtual first growth?
So I think the first thing I'm going to say is that it's amazing. I think what a really important aspect of anything with digital needs to be ethics and access. So while there is this huge boom of access and more people being able to get that access because it's virtual, they might not have mobility, etc. So there's a lot of enabling factors to this kind of digital transformation in health. But I think one of the things I'm really excited to see is how we can use different channels and different partnerships, which is where I focus on at Bayer, to make sure that there is equitable access for everyone, and especially in the women's health field. That doesn't just include demographic or sociological data, it also is geographic. And so being able to use digital not only to enable health for women, but also to use digital to enable access to women who don't have it for a variety of reasons.
So a couple of other pharma companies, in their quest to kind of get closer to the consumer, closer to the patient, have actually launched virtual first healthcare practices. Sanofi teamed up with Verily to launch a nationwide endocrinology practice focused exclusively on diabetes. And Takeda has launched Oshi Health, focused on GI medicine in a virtual first model, currently practicing in 3 states. Do you see your efforts in either case, Natalie or Priscilla, working to get that close to the woman as a consumer by actually getting involved in the actual healthcare delivery, something that's historically something pharma has not done?
I can go first. I think Natalie's done a lot of talking, so I'll give her I'll give her a break.
Thanks, Priscilla.
So I think there's 2 different ways that large organizations like Sanofi, like Bayer, can handle that. One is partnering to be the provider at the source. I think the place that's most interesting for me, and I'm speaking for me now, not necessarily for Bayer, is that where we need to be? So going back to the previous question about digital and access and how you can leverage it to give that care, especially back to women, is the need for Bayer, for an organization to provide that at the source? Or is it kind of duplicating efforts? Is it investigating a business model that might be profitable for the near term, but isn't sustainable because the need isn't going to be there for a sustainable amount of time? So I think these are all questions that organizations that decide to go that route need to ask themselves. I'm more interested in something that Natalie touched on in her initial answer to your question, and that is the need, right? And where is digital going to be able to come from one end and answer and meet at the intersection of what that need is, rather than saying, hey, that provider thing is cool. I want to get in on that. Just like, hey, blockchain's cool. What's this? What can we do in blockchain? I think the better question is, what are the needs that these women want? What are the unmet needs of this population? And then go and try and find the solution.
Yeah. Priscilla, I think we're kindred spirits in that regard. Regardless of any space that I've operated in, most recently coming from oncology, it's the patient is at the center, and you work towards that goal. But access is something that we're very passionate about. As well as, affordability, right? And those are trends, that we do see that may need to be addressed. So I'm not saying it's completely out, but, today I can't say, with any degree of certainty what role it'll play.
In many cases, not all, but in many cases, the digital health company's brand is front and center and much more important to the consumer than historically pharma brands have been to the consumer. The pharma brands have been targeting the physician, not the consumer. And frankly, most patients can't name the pharma brand drug of the drugs they're taking. So how do you think about brand going forward in digital when brand at the consumer level, frankly, has not really played out in pharma?
I guess I'll go first on that one. As a pharmaceutical company, right, and one that has a very strong desire to be agnostic when looking at solutions, right, to meet the patient's unmet need. I do see that old traditional way of working, moving, right, moving in a different direction. And I talk a lot about what we don't know, right, or what could happen. And as a company taking a stance that we want to be on the front end of that, right, and not on the back end. To me, brand recognition has a role to play, and it's very much dependent on the market that you're targeting, right, whether you can do direct to consumer or not. I hope I'm sort of answering your question. Please jump in if I'm going in a completely different direction than what you're interested in hearing.
Well, let me jump in and maybe ask it from a slightly different way in terms of where do you think maybe the top opportunities are between kind of digital companies and pharma? Is it in digital therapeutics, combination products, that companion diagnostics, therapy monitoring, which CMS has just proposed an entire new set of reimbursement schemes around therapy monitoring, screening tools. Where, if you were to prioritize among those or any others, how would you think about that?
I'm thinking about all of it. I'm thinking about everything that you mentioned. I think that it's almost a given, that digital health technologies will enable, in our world. But I'm very hopeful that we'll go beyond that, into actual intervention. So I go back to that patient need and what it will take to ensure, right, that patient receives that treatment, has access to that treatment.
Priscilla, let me put a different angle on it. A lot of the digital health companies drive their solutions to include network effect, where effectively, because they're at an essence, they're a communications platform and a digital information connectivity platform, they're working towards solutions where that frankly start to break down, not in a bad way, but in a positive way, the traditional role of physician prescribing to a patient as the only way a patient gets a solution. And if I look at a company like Dexcom, they built an entire ecosystem in the diabetes field that combines multiple devices, pumps, CGM, continuous glucose monitoring, and other elements, with multiple pieces of software for managing, with multiple products, including insulin, drugs that are connected. Now it's actually in companies like Novo Nordisk's interest to recommend Dexcom as a solution because their drug communicates with the platform and vice versa. I'm wondering how you might think about creating network effect as a pharmaceutical company in the women's health space, and how you would think about it.
Yeah, and I actually think it's essential, right? And I think I might have spoken about this on my last visit with HITLAB. But one of the things I think digital, and this touches on everything you just asked, including brand, and that is, interestingly, woman, capital W, has not been treated through the continuum of her life at the same time that we talk about continuum of care, right? When we talk about that topic, it's always about whatever that ailment is for that, or that condition is, and for the lifespan of the condition. And one of the things that I'm so passionate about women's health is that it starts from birth and all of the different experiences that the female body goes through, physically, emotionally, from birth all the way through that journey to death. To use digital, whether you create a platform, whether you create a network, which is an idea, I love. It's the narrative, and it is treating the individual, the woman, as support, as a network of support throughout her lifetime. And I think as a brand, Bayer and other organizations have an amazing opportunity to get that brand loyalty and that brand heart from consumers, because they were there when they scraped their knee. They were there when they got their first period. They were there when they, lost their first child, got their first gray hair. And being able to identify a brand that is there with you and for you through all of that, and recognizes all of that from the beginning to hold your hand through it, is something that I think a network for women's health, that digital health is something that for the first time ever, we'd be able to enable that experience for women through their life.
I'm going to finish up with one final question, and that is, the wellness space has migrated into the fitness space, and the fitness space is migrating into the healthcare space. We just saw United Health Group roll out Peloton as a free benefit to United Healthcare members. That's a communications platform with a lot of content. How do you view that kind of access and communications opportunity that a Peloton represents in front of, call it 44 million United Healthcare members potentially? And how do you view either playing or partnering and or coming up with your own solutions where digital health solutions represent a communications platform to the customer, and how do you play in that communications platform?
Yeah, I do think it's the future. As a company, it is something that we do want to explore. listening to Priscilla, I mean, she hit on something that's deeply important, and that is, there is an opportunity to follow a woman through her life. Certainly, whoever that woman is using, right, for our healthcare reimbursement, in my mind, right, is a part of that woman's journey, and anything that we can do that streamlines information for her, or that enables her to receive the care that she deserves, is part of the mix. And we would be looking, to partner in that area.
And I think it's interesting and incredibly powerful what they've done, but kind of bookending my first comment, it's also potentially very challenging, because that is a lot of content, and you want to be ethical, and you want to make sure that you're supporting whether it's women or anybody really using the Peloton to keep their health and keep fit and help stay proactively and ahead of any kind of conditions. But the irony, I hope, is not lost on a lot of people, that one of the first forays that Peloton had into addressing women led to a fantastic Aviator Gin commercial. So you just, with great content comes great responsibility. I'll leave it there.
Well, great. This is it's great talking with all of you. And I wonder if you just want to close with any other comments about how the companies individually are reaching out to partner. Natalie, I know you spoke a little bit about it earlier, so maybe I'll toss to Priscilla about how you will partner. We know J&J, for example, has J Labs as a very aggressive move at partnering. What do you see in your future?
Bayer has a pretty robust network of partnerships. So I personally am responsible for IT, global partnerships, making sure that not only do we have strategic alignment for our platforms and our cloud providers, but also university partnerships, startups, and really how can you gain access to us so that we can do pilots and prototypes to enable consumer health, pharmaceutical health, and crop science to be successful to our patients, growers, and farmers and consumers. But we also have our venture arm ourselves called LEAPS. We have a group within pharma specifically called G4A that does external partnering and open innovation on an annual basis. And we have the Consumer Health Accelerator that does everything from M&A to kind of greenfield prototypes and investments. And so unlike the J Labs model, which has sort of incubators around the world, and they sort of cycle through and hope the best rises to the top, we take a different approach, which is very targeted strategic conversations with startups to bring them in and run sort of virtual prototypes and pilots through the organization. And so we've been that successful and are continuing on that model.
Well, that's great and makes a lot of sense. So I would be neglected if I didn't invite you to join Impact and join several other big top 10 pharma companies that are in Impact, along with many payers that are focused on virtual first and digitalization. So, but thank you very much for participating with me, and Stan, hopefully you're out there and we'll come back on.
I am, and thank you, Don, for really just leading a tremendous set of interviews around this very important topic. And again, Priscilla and Natalie, thank you both for your service to the board of the women and the women's health tech ecosystem, which is just massive at this point and global. Thank you both.
It's an honor. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Stan. Thank you, Don.
Thank you.